Today we want to look at the causes of kickback in a table saw and how to prevent them. There are two big safety issues with a table saw. One of them is getting your finger in the blade, in which case the results of that are obvious and they're devastating. Kickback is very dangerous as well. And what we mean by kickback, it happens on a rip, not on a cross cut. So we're talking about a rip cut. As you push this through, somehow the board binds. That is, it gets caught against the blade, against the side of the blade. And that produces a lot of friction, and it kicks the board back toward the operator. It can be straight back or it can be up into your face. And so we need to prevent it from happening. And I'd like to talk to you about what causes it and how we can prevent it. Again, the basic cause is that the board gets pinched against the side of the blade. Doesn't matter if it's, quote, pinched against the teeth of the blade, because they'll just cut right through it. But if it's pinched against the side of the blade, then the friction with the blade can push it back. There are a couple of ways that can happen. One of them is that the distance from the fence to the teeth of the blade here in the front of the saw, or the distance from the fence to the teeth, is here in the back of the saw. And if it's narrower in the back, you can see how that would pinch the wood against the blade and cause kickback. So one cause of kickback is to have the fence not parallel but towed in toward the blade in the back. So in order to prevent that from happening, we have to properly set the fence with relation to the blade. And the way we do that is by very precisely measuring the distance to the blade in the front, in the back, and in the front. And by the way, you need to measure it on the same tooth. So you measure on a particular tooth at the front of the blade, then you keep track of that and you measure at the back of the blade. Incidentally, we will be doing a video with more detail on exactly how to do that procedure and to get it right, because it's very important that you get that right. Now, there's a second way that kickback can happen on a table saw, or really a second way that the board can get forced against this side surface of the blade and cause kickback. And that is if there's a certain kind of warp in the board. And this happens in a lot of boards, by the way, where as you cut them, the two ends in the back tend to come back together because there's a warp in the board pushing it in toward the blade. So when that warp, which can be very powerful in a board this thick, brings those two ends together behind the blade, it causes friction on the side of the blade, it binds, and you get kickback. The way to prevent that is with what's called a riving knife. This is a riving knife. It's simply a piece of metal that is equal to the thickness or narrower than the thickness of the blade. And what we do is we place the riving knife very close to the blade, but behind it. So you can see here the geometry of this situation is that this riving knife is really less than a half an inch from every one of the teeth that go past it. So what happens is, as the board goes through, if it's warped and the back of the board tends to come in, it's putting its force against the riving knife, not against the blade. So the riving knife prevents it from binding with the side of the blade. Now, you may have a riving knife in a different kind of configuration. For instance, on this particular, it comes with a saw guard, and the saw guard actually is a riving knife that sits behind the blade in the same type of configuration as this riving knife that I showed. So your saw may have this, or it may have something similar to this, or it may have a riving knife, or you may have nothing. If you have nothing, you're in danger and you need to correct it and get a riving knife behind your blade. So, to recap, there's the basic cause of kickback, which can be very dangerous and injure you, is friction with the side of the blade, not the teeth, but with the side of the blade, which binds the piece of wood and pushes it back. And that particular situation can occur two different ways. One is where the back of the fence is closer to the blade than the front of the fence, which naturally binds it and causes kickback, or a warped piece of wood, which after it leaves the blade, warps back toward the blade and binds and kicks back. And the solution for the problem with the fence is to properly adjust your fence, and the solution for the warped board is to be sure you always cut with a riving knife in place. We hope you found this useful. We hope you liked it. If so, please hit the like button below. And as always, please subscribe if you like the content, and we'll keep you notified of future content.